Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have the Game Week 6 preview, and it covers everything you need to know for this game week. We'll be looking at a big opportunity, which I think is going significantly under the radar and certainly deserves more talk. We'll be looking at the impact on Manchester City, given Rodri's absence. We'll be looking at Raya versus Havertz, and we'll be looking at the forward and defense fixtures separately to help deduce which are the best budget options, amongst a few other things. We are fast approaching 3,000 subscribers, and if we could get there before the Game Week 6 deadline, that would be absolutely magnificent. It would take a second out of your day. Just go and subscribe now if you've been enjoying the content. A lot of you have, but haven't pressed the button. So if you could do so, I'd be very appreciative. Without anything else needing to be said, let's get into the video. Right, now this preview will be different to ones done in the past. In the past, we look at variables in isolation. For example, we'll look at Semenyo. Is Bowen a good option this week? Should we look at Spurs defense, etc., etc.? However, this week, I feel mainly because of the wildcards that are being played and just the general landscape of the game, everything really seems to be interconnected, but to an amplified extent. And I think that makes for great content and great discussion. And we can have a lot of interesting perspectives, essentially, on how to spin it and really maximize the upside. I think this is where the opportunities lie. So as a result, everything that you see on one slide will lead on to another, and it's almost done a little bit like a story. We're going to start with Arsenal, Manchester City, and Liverpool, because they really form the core of the side, the template, and then you'll see how that essentially widens to the larger pool. Okay, so given that a lot of people are on the wildcard, and even if they're not, they're looking to bring Arsenal assets in for Leicester at home, Southampton at home, Bournemouth away to an extent, what is the optimal trio? Now, Saka and Gabriel, for me, are absolute locks, and there shouldn't really be any time spent or any significant time spent on them or discussion needed. Very simply, Gabriel is the biggest box threat in the league. He plays for the best defense in the league, and he's part of the best set-piece taking team in the league, where he is the most likely recipient. So that is an absolute slam dunk. Then, considering he's 6 million, which is, I think, genuinely 0.5 underpriced for someone of his goal threat, especially given the external conditions that I discussed, on top of the fact he has good fixtures, there's a haul in the next two. Leicester traditionally, at least last year, weren't particularly good at defending set pieces. So there really is a haul on the cards in the next two. You can't see Southampton and Leicester causing them too many problems. And as a result, I think the floor of Gabriel over the next 2 weeks is probably 8 points. The ceiling's probably more around 28, which is ridiculous for a defender. But honestly, if you watch Arsenal take set pieces and him in the air, it's honestly, he's the most likely person, right, to achieve that. Not even Trent, I would say. I genuinely would say it's Gabriel because of the goal threat. So if you can have him, great. I would say, however, if you don't have him, it's not the end of the world. It's statistically more likely for him to not score a goal. Significantly more likely, right? He's not going to score a goal every single game. I think he'll do it at a rate maybe we haven't seen too much before, which is something I spoke about pre-season, similar to Haaland's goal-scoring record this year. Although we're going to come to that. And I do think that you may be surprised at how much he performs the expected goals by, but nonetheless, you do not need to break your team apart just to get a defender because he's good in the air. However, top option, and for me, still comfortably the best defender. Saka, again, at his price at 10 million, I'd probably say he's 0.5 underpriced. Penalties, he has set pieces from one side, especially with Odegaard not being in the side. So even open play, set pieces from that are derived from open play. Odegaard definitely had some of those. I remember watching balls in the right half space, dead ball situations where Odegaard would take him. But now Saka will have dominion over all of those. So that's a great avenue to points. Penalties. His open play goal threat is brilliant because of his ball striking coming from that right-hand side. It's really improved. Then he's an absolute magician, right? Just watch him on the ball. So his open play assist threat there. And he has so many routes to points. I think in the 2 games now where he won't be shackled anywhere near as much, he won't have anywhere near as much defensive responsibility. He won't have to start from so deep. He can start higher up the pitch. With his volume of attacking actions that he will have, like he did against Brighton in the first half, he's really, really well set for a haul. And I expect minimum 1 haul in the next 2. And I'll be quite disappointed if I don't get at least something like 20-ish points from. But that's relatively simple. The big question becomes Havertz or Raya. Okay. The set of fixtures now that we are embarking on is significantly different to what we've had in the past. We've had Villa away, we've had Spurs away, and we get City away. That is disgusting to have in the first 5. That is a very, very, very tough run to start you with. And they're all fixtures which are better for Raya. And not only were they better for Raya, but Havertz was significantly hampered. Spurs away, they were riceless. The first 35 to 40 minutes, Arsenal got dominated against City, and then they lost Trossard, and then they played a 6-3-0 off the ball with Havertz at right centre mid, outside his own box. So you really can't judge him on that, and I don't think it's fair to judge his attacking prospects, nor intelligent, when trying to project what he's going to do. Rather, I would look at the game against Brighton in the first half before Rice got sent off. I think that's much more likely to reflect what's actually going to happen. And that looks good. That bodes really well for him because Saka looked like such a threat. He was always in the right positions, Havertz. And with that zonal dominance and with that quality, not just his quality, but Arsenal's chance creation quality, he's going to pick up chances. Now, the counter is, okay, what if he plays at 8? I wouldn't be surprised if Jesus actually doesn't start against Leicester. I expect him to start today against Bolton. And then given I'm 90% sure Trossard's suspension is served midweek in the Cup, I honestly think we could pretty much see the same Arsenal team. Defense aside, I'm not sure what the fullbacks are going to be, but I think maybe Zinchenko White. That's what I imagine, given that Timber and Calafiori are nursing some type of knock, apparently. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Havertz 9 again. There's no real need to change it when Jesus hasn't looked as sharp. And even if Havertz is to play as the 8, because I can't see him being dropped, especially with what he offers you off the ball, I think it's fine. Jesus is very much a ball-to-feet type of player. I don't think he wants to be the one stretching the line and running in behind too often, nor is he the one that you're going to go long to too often. And if you are, you're always going to drop it in front of him, and he's going to be looking to get flick-ons, but more so with the feet, whereas Havertz goes with the head. And I think you're going to need a second striker-like type of player to make a lot of those runs from midfield, and that will be Havertz. We saw in pre-season when he played as an 8, it wasn't the same as last year. It was very much a second striker role with Odegaard facilitating that deeper build-up. Now, sure, Odegaard's not there, but even if Havertz is playing, I guess, right centre mid, because you probably want Rice on the left, well, then I wouldn't be surprised if Rice is the one who helps out from deeper phases, right? And it makes sense because he's been brought up as a 6 anyway, so he's probably more comfortable there than Havertz doing it. And it just wouldn't make sense because you want Havertz on the end of that. So I actually don't think, even if he is to play as a number 8, it's that big of a deal. You also have good exit routes to him, and his ceiling is much higher than Raya's in the next 2. Sure, you have the price difference, but you make up for it elsewhere. But realistically, how many shots are Southampton and Leicester going to have, right? Not many. You can't see Raya's ceiling being past 7, and even that, I think, is somewhat generous given how many goals Arsenal should score. So with all that in mind, I'm very, very confident that Havertz is a better option. He also has really nice exit routes. If Solanke catches fire, easy. Jackson keeps going, easy. You want to go down to a Wood, a DCL, easy. Even if you want to go up to like an Ollie Watkins, okay, you find a million elsewhere. So for me, I think Havertz is comfortably the better option. Every single... okay, this is the last thing I'd like to talk about. As opposed to just giving Havertz prop, I honestly do think, and sure, you could say this is a bit of an out there theory and etc., but I honestly do think that part of the reason people are picking Raya is psychological as opposed to analytical. It's very safe. You pretty much know you're going to get a fantastic floor, but accessing that ceiling, that Robert Sanchez, that Andre Onana, that Matt Sells type of ceiling, Mark Flecken type of ceiling, that's going to be very difficult because Arsenal aren't going to concede that many shots against the likes of Southampton and Leicester. And I think they're paying 5.5 for the safety, but really, if you're trying to win, which I think you should be trying to do, the upside is always in the 4.5. Every single year without fail, the 4.5 proves themselves to be the best value. Okay, sure, Alisson might have like 5 more points, but for what? $1 million and a half extra? It's not worth it. Sanchez and Onana have already presented much better value than Raya this year. I think they're both 3 points behind, and they're what? 1 million cheaper? Imagine using that 1 million in defense. That's the difference between like a 5 million and a 6 million defender. That's the difference between a Romero and a Gabriel. How big is that difference in a million? So I honestly think that there's no real way to justify going for Raya. Sure, you can be like, okay, I'm going for the long-term Arsenal set and forget. I'd honestly argue Saliba might be better because at least he has the goal threat from set pieces, and he's still a threat from those, right? But for me, when the 4.5 has worked every single year, year in, year out, nothing really seems to have changed in the first 5 to 6 weeks either. Raya's fixtures have got worse. I would just take the upside with Havertz. Only after stopping the recording have I realized how long that clip is. It might be one of my longest, if not my longest clip ever. So I apologize if I rambled a little bit there, but I hope I got my point across. Okay, now let's move on to Manchester City. There is no Rodri. That is a big blow. You've seen the statistics with and without. There's a huge difference in their performance in every facet, but mainly their win percentage with and without Rodri. So how does City fare, and how can we apply that to FPL? I think in the short term, it's okay. You've seen Kovacic before Rodri came into the side as he was coming back late from the Euros, and Kovacic did a magnificent job. They've also got İlkay Gündoğan, a very experienced, multifaceted player who's more than capable of playing as a six. Now, as well as Rodri, no, but he's still capable of playing there. Now, in the long term, I think it could have a greater impact. There was some fantastic discussion on Twitter. I remember seeing it pre-season about Manchester United, and now I've seen it about Manchester City, about how you replace Rodri's minutes, right? Because those minutes that he was going to play, pretty much 90 every game for every single Premier League game, now you have to go and attribute that to other players. Now, you're not going to give it all to Kovacic. You're going to give a bit to Kovacic, a bit to Gundo, maybe some to Matthias Nunes, etc., right? And that's where I think they'll struggle, when they have to essentially get these guys who weren't meant to play 38 games in a Premier League season and have to give them significantly more minutes, because they don't really have a natural replacement, right? Stones can't do the role anymore in that double pivot, I don't think, because Rodri provides you such good... Well, he improves your ball circulation a lot, given how quick he is at doing that. And I don't think Stones is currently in the physical shape where his body allows him to be that type of player. Rico Lewis is great in that facet, but he's obviously of the smaller nature, and in a Premier League era where physicality is so important, how does that bode, etc., right? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. I'm just going to take the path that they're going to be worse as a result, which is fair, and I'll wait to see how Pep iterates. I haven't thought about it too much, nor do I think it's particularly important, because we'll find out in about a week, 2 max. And with this guy, I don't really want to try and guess him beforehand. I think I did it preseason decently with Gvardiol and Haaland, but this one, I just don't think it's worth giving too much thought to, because what are we realistically going to do? Like, you're not going to sell a City asset now. You've got them, because realistically, the ones you've got are probably Lewis and Gvardiol, and it'll be a very luxury transfer to me. And then you're not going to sell Haaland either. So for me, I just wait. Let's go on to Lewis and Gvardiol. I think Gvardiol's expected minutes to get even better now, because now that you've lost Rodri, you really need your best backline and your best set of physicality in the side. Gvardiol provides you with both. He also provides you with attacking upside should you wish to go for another defensive-minded player in the City side compared to usual to compensate for Rodri's absence, almost like a 2-to-1, and then use Gvardiol in a more advanced role like he did last year. I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. When Walker plays at right centre-back, he's going to be the one going into the pockets, into that midfield space, into the left half space. He's going to be playing somewhat close to Haaland or that left eight. So I think he'll definitely be able to generate attacking returns there, especially with how competent of a player he is in those spaces. He's good in small spaces compared to pretty much any defender. Good ball striking, good intelligence, moves well, etc. And even when Lewis is playing, okay, fine. At least we have him on the pitch, right? At least the expected minutes are good. So I'm still quite hot on Gvardiol, if not very hot. Lewis, I think you'll get the upside with, because there's no way that he's benched every game. Just too good of a player, offers you too much, especially when the passing from that central space, central deeper space in midfield is going to be lacking due to Rodri's absence. So I think Lewis will definitely play. However, I wouldn't be surprised to see a slight reduction in the expected minutes, because now you're losing someone so important that facilitates Lewis being in the side. So that's where I'm at with that. I think Gvardiol goes up a little bit, Lewis goes down a little bit. And with Lewis, it's more so being able to time when he's going to play. I actually don't think it's too difficult to do that, though. For example, I was pretty sure he's going to be benched against Arsenal, because you want your right back to be able to cope with a transitional threat of Martinelli. Against Newcastle, similar with Gordon. But against Fulham, where on the left side it's Alex Iwobi, I don't think you need to compensate for that as much, especially when Fulham play more of a 4-2-3-1 as opposed to a 4-3-3. Your winger's not going to be as high and wide, and therefore it's not as important to protect in that manner. So, for example, I think he starts that game, and I think you could basically do that for every fixture. And from there, you'll be able to figure out his expected minutes and see who rotates nicely with him. For me, he should never really be your third defender, but third slash. I do think it'll also have an impact on their attack for the reasons I mentioned about their ability to circulate the ball as quickly, especially when like sides are going to go with the deeper block against them, right? You want pass, move the block, create space, penetrate, bang, bang. But not only that, Rodri's ball striking from outside the box is also a useful mechanism to, I guess, countering low blocks. For all of those reasons, there's no way they get better, I would say, without him. In terms of how that affects Haaland, well, we'll actually look at him a little bit more when it comes to the captaincy section. But is there any way that Foden becomes an option? Well, De Bruyne's injury is not a long one. He'll be back, I think, relatively soon. And with the amount of options they have in midfield, and given there's no Rodri, I think you give increased responsibility to the likes of Bernardo and Gundo in the middle. Now, does he play De Bruyne and Foden together, knowing that there's no Rodri? Honestly, I don't think he does that too much. Savio looks so good on the right, and he is the guy who's going to be more useful against the deeper block, I think, for his skill set compared to Foden's. Sure, you can leverage Foden's ball striking in the middle, but I don't think you'll want to be doing that too much. I think to lose De Bruyne and drop him would be a big compensation, and also a big compensation to take Gundo or Bernard out the side when Rodri's not going to be there. So for me, that guy is just an avoid for now until the trend changes, if at all. Finally, let's do some Luis Diaz analysis. Okay, I probably didn't give this guy the appreciation he was worth in preseason, which is quite annoying because I even looked at the Feyenoord system and I remember thinking, like, oh, this is pretty cool, but I just didn't think it could be replicated. Not because of the footballing quality, or because of the footballing quality combined with the ego. It's probably not the right word. I just didn't think that he was going to use Salah in the same way he used the right winger at Feyenoord, and he didn't, but he still used his left wing with that type of, well, it gave him that type of attacking responsibility, which I didn't think he was going to do. I thought he would switch the dynamic. But at Feyenoord, Arne Slot definitely had a system where the right winger would stay traditionally wider, operate more in a creative role, and the left winger was allowed to penetrate those half spaces more, and their output reflected that system. Now, with Liverpool, I just thought that he would basically reverse it to an extent, and I thought there would be a bit more of a via media of the two. And there is, but I just didn't think Luis Diaz would have this much freedom to attack in the way that he's done. There was a shot in the first half against Bournemouth where he really stung the hands of Kepa, and he didn't score from it, and no one really said anything. But that was when I took notice. I was like, everything about that was so sharp. All the actions were so snappy, and the ball striking was magnificent. I didn't realize he had that in his locker. And look, ball striking doesn't necessarily equate to good finishing, right? But he showcased his ability to be a good finisher. I just read a stat on Twitter before I started to record this video that he never underperformed his XG in a season, apart from last year. And had he gone at the rate that he had done previously, he would have scored 8 more goals. I'm actually starting to wonder whether this rate is probably a little bit more sustainable than I thought, and he could actually be a very good option. Now, do I think he can cover Salah? No, and the reason for that is purely expected minutes. Gakpo actually looks pretty good at left wing, and with the volume of games these guys play nowadays, it's ridiculous. I just don't think that you're going to get 90 minutes week in and week out from him. You haven't done so as of now, so why would you later on in the season when Gakpo is probably required even more, especially when you go deeper in the Champions League and you want to be playing Diaz for that, I imagine, as opposed to some of the lesser quote-unquote Premier League games. Get away with it. So I think Diaz, in terms of output, could do really well. It's just the expected minutes for me that means that I still don't think he can cover Salah, but I'm much hotter on him than I was in the past. And yeah, if you want to go there, previously I probably would have had bigger objections, but now I don't think I can have that when I realize that, the system actually might be really good for him, and he just looks in red hot form, and his finishing is probably a little bit better than I gave him quality credit for. Right, I told you that each part would lead into the next, so here is now the part about Mohamed Salah, because I think we really need to talk about him. I'll go on to Bournemouth next, and I just have a few good things to say that I would like to say about them. Okay, so I have a little theory that Salah might be better away from home than he is at home this season. Where does Salah thrive? Salah thrives in those situations where he can come inside and he can really isolate the defender. Because if Salah gets you one-on-one, you're in a lot of trouble. Forest did a really good job of keeping him wide and using the block to make sure that there's at least one player always really tight to him. But if not, there's always a man to cover, and just generally the space between the one defender and the one covering Salah is always really small, if not a double up, and they keep him wide. Whereas the likes of Bournemouth, the likes of Man United, they were willing to concede isolated situations through different means, but they conceded different types of isolated situations where Salah was allowed to come inside as a result. And when he gets you one-on-one, when the best right winger in the world gets you one-on-one, you are in trouble. Away from home, where teams, when other teams are at home, and especially given the philosophical shifts in Premier League managers' minds, in my opinion, that is currently present, teams are being more willing to play in their way, right? Less pragmatism. And that's something we've been seeing developing for, I'd say, about 2 years now. I remember tweeting about this quite a while ago as well. And those are all conditions where I think, through different means again, that Salah can get more isolated situations. Whereas at Anfield, I think people clock on a bit more like, okay, if we play like this, we're just going to get beat. Kind of stupid to give these guys this type of freedom. Why don't we just copy Nottingham Forest's model? It worked. Now, not as many sides will do that as I think they should, but nonetheless, the probability of them doing that will increase, and likelihood, and also the fact that they will actually do it. Whereas at home, I think that will be a lesser occurrence. So, with Salah having more isolated situations away, with Wolves losing Mosquera, with them not being in the greatest form, with their game model anyway being one where Salah can certainly profit from, all you have to do is just look at the type of chances they've conceded. Now, it's definitely beneficial for the 9, I'd say. But also, if Salah is to come inside, then he can certainly profit, given the way Liverpool play. And it's more just one behind the striker in Szoboszlai as opposed to a 2, given the double pivot in front of their defense. I really, really, really, really like the prospect of him away at Wolves, especially as a differential. And you'll see how much in the next section. And then Palace away. Palace have looked poor defensively. Man United honestly could have scored 5. I was so impressed by their attacking performance. I thought it was a great coaching performance from Ten Hag. And it probably didn't get the credit it deserved because of how many chances they missed. But they made a lot of chances. And they could have had Palace out cold in the first half. Could have easily scored 3 there. So those next two fixtures, I just see big upside. So if you are going to sell him, that's cool on a wildcard. I understand it. Even the wildcard drive I built doesn't have him. But it goes back to my point. Do you really need to wildcard to take an asset like Salah out? Is there no way maybe you can take a hit to get like double Arsenal in? You could probably get double Arsenal in anyway if you've been taking this strategy. Having triples not that essential. It's only 2 weeks worth of good fixtures. You can get them and you know what? Maybe get one next week and you just miss out on a little bit of upside of Leicester at home. Not the end of the world. But for me, I'd be very, very, very cautious of selling Salah. And I really do like his prospects in the next 2 weeks. I also think Chelsea at home in Game Week 8 is quite a nice fixture. I'm still not sold on our defense. I think we concede too many big type of chances. We'll call them medium type of chances, actually. We'll come on to that close to the time. But yeah, I think Salah could definitely haul in the next 3. And I really wouldn't be one bit surprised. Also, don't look at the fact that he got 6-pointer against Bournemouth and think, oh, it's only 8 points in the last 2 games. Forest, fair enough, conditions weren't ideal, but we sort of knew that. Bournemouth, it was just a little bit unlucky. I mean, there were so many instances where I thought, okay, this is the one, this is the one, this is the one. The fact that there was that high of a volume of those instances, combined with the fact he was so close so many times, I think a haul is right around the corner. Right, I just wanted to give some props to Bournemouth, and if you're on a wildcard or if you're looking at attacking a little bit of upside, here's a differential opportunity. Not Semenyo, of course, because a lot of people are going to own him, but maybe Marcus Tavernier. Now, let's talk about Bournemouth as a side in particular. I've spoken about how at home I think they'll be very difficult to keep a clean sheet against. Their high press has really impressed me. I think, especially on a smaller pitch, naturally, for all the obvious reasons, that's going to bode better. And Southampton at home, Leicester away, a very, very nice fixture on. I think they can pretty much score against anyone in the league, and I really wouldn't like having a defender going away then. I would not see that as a green fixture at all. Sure, in the FDI, it might be a 2. This is easily like a 3 now. Okay, so if you're on a wildcard, I definitely take Semenyo. There are 2 things to consider here. If you're not, do you take the upside of going for one of them, but likely having to move them out, or spending money on a rotating option because they have Arsenal, Villa, City after that, or do you just fade them? And is there any worth in going for Tavernier, Semenyo double up? Now, Tavernier has had really good expected minutes. But for me, when you don't have a player who's ever shown a sustained period of attacking output, I just wouldn't do it. I don't think it's worth it. The main reason I brought this up is because I thought it was actually quite a nice, intricate play. And someone suggested this in the comments a few videos ago. But after some thinking, I wouldn't go Tavernier. I think if we're going to do it, just go for Semenyo. I think there's too much risk associated with Tavernier considering the fixture swing after 2 weeks. Would I bring Semenyo in isolation if I'm not using a wildcard? Earlier today, I was probably leaning towards yes, then I gave it a little bit more thought, and I'm going to go with no. I think they've still got enough attack as well. There'll be a bit of a spread of output. If Anderson, Tara off the bench, I think it's actually a decent route to assist points. And you've got Tavernier, you've got Kluivert, you've got Sinistera. And whilst Semenyo might have 90, and he probably will have 90 again, and I think he's a great asset to have this week. I would love it. I probably wouldn't do it if you have other fires, quote unquote, in your team that you need to put out, or the transfer down the line could be very, very useful. For example, we see a little fixture swing in 8 and a bigger one in 12, but mainly looking at the one in 8, could that transfer be better used in your defense? Is the opportunity cost significantly high if you get it wrong with Semenyo? All of these type of things I'd factor in. Sure, there's a lot of upside there, and I would definitely consider it. I think it's a super marginal call. I'm just presenting the counter argument because I was pretty high on bringing Semenyo in, and then I've slightly cooled knowing that the opportunity cost is quite big, given it's only about 2. Now, I know at the end of that slide, it said we're going to talk about Bryan Mbeumo, and we are going to, but after this. And this is where I think maybe the opportunity lies. I will start by saying that this is more of a strategic play as opposed to a footballing one. I'm obviously going to use footballing analysis to try and justify it to an extent, because I haven't even made my mind up as to what I'm going to do. But I genuinely just wanted to present this to you because I know that even by the end of today, I won't have made my mind up on it. I'm just going to present it to you and you can see what you think and you can play around with it simply because I haven't seen any talk about it and I think it really does deserve more. What if we didn't captain Erling Haaland this week? Part of the reason I say this is strategic is one of the reasons I'm doing it is not just because I think Salah could be better. He could. But also because so many people are selling Salah. So now you have not just the upside of the fact that you got him captain, but also that a lot of people aren't going to own him. And the people that are wildcarding are, I would say, engaged managers, right? That's your real competition. And gaining a huge edge on them, well, that could be great. Okay, let's talk about the down points for Haaland, of which there are quite a few this week. First of all, it's a 12:30 game away at Newcastle. The ground will be bouncing. And you can say these narratives don't matter, but these people are human, and I think it does to an extent. The ground will be bouncing. It's an early kickoff, and no one likes that. And everyone seems to be a little bit more sluggish in those. But the main reasons are there's no De Bruyne behind him. And when there's no De Bruyne behind him, he is worse. He is quite a bit worse. Especially if Foden's going to play there, who's definitely more of a, in a respectful way, and for a lack of a better term, a bit of a ball hog. And he likes to shoot more in those zones, as opposed to his mind just going to pass to Haaland. And there's no Rodri, right? This will be their first real game. Obviously, they've got a game in the cup, but like it was literally a second 11. This will be their first real game without him. They'll probably have to make some in-game adjustments, getting used to it to an extent, without both having Rodri and De Bruyne out, because they haven't had to do that so far, right? And they're probably two of their top three players alongside Haaland. So there's that. Newcastle are also a better side than Wolves. And I just wonder if they learn from Arsenal. Do they learn that, okay, we can go deep and we can block like that? And you know what? They will struggle to an extent because they're not the same side without De Bruyne and Rodri. Now, if that City-Arsenal second half was being replayed, and if De Bruyne and Rodri were both in that side, I don't think Arsenal would have been able to hold on. I think City would have had too much. But without them, it's a completely different ballgame. And the drop-off is big because you are replacing two world-class players. So there is certainly downside there to going for Haaland, I think. Now, what's the positives? Well, if Newcastle are to play in the usual way, I think they're still way too susceptible to transitions. I think watching them against Fulham, the spaces between the lines, well, they're far too exploitable because they were too big. I thought the midfield was getting pulled quite a bit. And that's not great because when the midfield gets pulled quite a bit, then you have really technical players in good, fairly large pockets of spaces, and they can release to Haaland pretty easily and pretty efficiently. So with all that in mind, I still expect Haaland to do well and accumulate quite a high volume of chances. I just wanted to flip it and say if Newcastle set up in a different way, if we can get that, then I think with all of the other variables at play, I'm not super bullish on it. And if I knew Newcastle were going to set up in a deep block, I'd honestly slap the armband on Salah without a question. Okay, so let's move on to Salah. Well, they've lost Mosquera Wolves, and I've already talked about all the positives to him. The main reason, again, it is strategic. It's not so much footballing. I think he could do well from a footballing standpoint. I'm not trying to discount that. It's just the fact that so many people won't own him out of the engaged guys. And I do think that this could actually be a really nice spot to exploit. The other thing is, if you have Salah, you probably have Haaland as well, right? So the downside is limited. Okay, I'm going to say, let's say Haaland scores a hat-trick and Salah gets 1 assist. It's an 11-point swing. Okay, fine, you took a risk. It's not the end of the world. However, let's say we get it right. Let's just say, for example, you have Haaland and Salah. You're not wildcarding, so you can't get to Mbeumo this week. You go Salah captain and you own Haaland, and the reverse will be Haaland captain plus the mid that someone else has got, which is Mbeumo. Let's just say Haaland gets 7 points. Salah gets 13. Okay, so now you have 26 points from Salah, and your opposition will have, 7 points from Haaland, doubled, 14, plus whatever Mbeumo gets. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Mbeumo blanks to an extent. I think West Ham will tighten up a bit, which we're going to talk about in the next section. Even if he gets 5 points, I'll be in 6 points, right? Which is fair. I'm not undervaluing him against West Ham. 6 points is a very fair thing. You're still up 6 points. And that's still assuming that both Mbeumo and Haaland return and Salah doesn't do better. I just think when you have these type of opportunities, they should at least be considered. So that's all I have to say on that topic, and I would definitely give it some consideration. I've obviously talked about all the positives of Salah against Wolves previously. And the last one is, do we captain Saka? I'm going to say no, because I still think in these type of games, Arsenal's spread of output isn't so limited to just Havertz and Saka. I think in these type of games, the likes of Declan Rice and the left winger can get involved a little bit more. In the mid-table games against the likes of Brighton, I think, it's pretty much all Havertz and Saka, and I really like it. But here, I would say it's spread about just a little bit bigger. And Saka doesn't reach those big hauls enough for me to captain him when Haaland and Salah both have good prospects. Okay, so I'm just going to in touch on Mbeumo here. But all the positives are there for me, and I completely understand. I love the fixtures. I think they are so good. I think he has all the fundamentals nailed down. Penalties, expected minutes, good positioning, right? The only counter argument I would say is I don't think he's as good as people are making him out to be. Yes, probably, I wouldn't say essential on wildcard, but easily one of the best options. However, I don't think the gap between him and, let's say, like a Luis Diaz is enormous, right? For the reason that without Visser and without Tony, I do think that like Brentford are undoubtedly a worse side. And if they're not to use their big game structure, which I doubt they will, right? Because it's reserved for the bigger games, with all due respect. I think you'll play right wing. And I wonder if their chance creation suffers a little bit. The way they used to create in general was through transitions. I felt like their attacking transitions were so impressive. But when you don't have that connector type in the middle of Whistle, when you don't have his carrying anymore to bring you up the pitch, albeit it was slightly different because of the number 9 role he was playing, I do wonder if maybe they struggle to create a little bit for Mbeumo, and he plays a slightly more creative role. I don't think he'll play up top. I think he'll play on the right with maybe Strada through the mid, maybe like a false 9 with Carvalho. I just think they're going to be a little bit worse, and that will reflect in his output. So I don't think that he's going to set the world on fire. Do very well, sure, that's fine, and I wouldn't be surprised one bit. I just don't think he's going to do maybe as well as he did, for example, last season at the start, where he was just blitzing the league up. I don't think he'll do it to that extent. This is more of a gut feeling, right? So please remember, this is a gut feeling. This isn't analysis. West Ham have been so bad so far defensively. I mean that with the utmost respect, but they have genuinely been very poor. I think every West Ham fan, and even their players, will say that themselves. I still think that this system and this selection of personnel in the midfield, combined with the system, it just does not work in the midfield. And I think finally, after getting slapped by Chelsea, that will be the wake up call for them to change it. And that's where I can expect, especially because they're away at home and you don't have the pressure of the home crowd. I do think maybe they tighten up a little bit and it becomes a little bit more difficult for Brentford than people think. That's more of a gut feeling. I just think if they continue like this, they're going to get beaten. It's just unacceptable to play this level of football with that squad. There's too much quality in there. Going on to West Ham, Bowen, I do think is slightly underlooked. If you're going to play at 9 with all his fundamentals, how good of a finisher he is, such a sharp player, fixtures are decent, right? Like I quite like Brentford as a fixture from an attacking prospect. I like Ipswich in game week 7. Spurs and Man United again, they're really not too bad at all. You know what you're going to get, and you're definitely going to get opportunities if you're able to pounce on those transitions. So, I think Bowen's definitely a fairly safe option with quite a high floor and one with a high ceiling if West Ham can play a little bit better. Just something to consider. Then ESR and Eze are two people I've been spoken about. Should we sell? Should we keep? Very difficult and for very different reasons. If you can keep ESR in the squads, I would do so. Like Villa and City isn't ideal. I don't think the Forest fixture away from him is great as well. But there's definitely potential for him to get at least one return right in the next 3. And it'll save you making a transfer down the line. You can be more attacking elsewhere. On a wildcard, I probably wouldn't have him. But if in your squad, I wouldn't mind keeping him, especially because he's unlikely to act as a mass blocker, right? Like, what is he going to really block at 5'7"? How much value can you really extract out of him? The only thing is he blocks a midfield spot, but you have 5. You should be able to make do even with Rodgers. Eze, I think, is tougher. It's a lot tougher because I don't like that Liverpool fixture at home. Then they have Forest, and I'm just like, that's not a great fixture either. After that, it's okay, like Tottenham, Wolves. But he's looked pretty good in terms of FPL, apart from his finishing. I think you give it one more game, and the Liverpool fixture is the perfect time to sell him because, look, if he's failed up to that point again, then you can sell him knowing that this fixture is going to be harder and he's going to have far less ideal conditions to perform. I would, however, probably just give him the Everton game and then just see how he does, because a player like this at 6.9 is immense value if he ever gets going. And it's quite a nice spot, again, going from a strategic perspective, where a lot of people will be selling him on a wildcard, so at least you'll have even more of his upside. Now, these two customized fixture tickers are sorted by attack and defense, and therefore they're very useful, right? As you can see, look what the difference between, for example, a West Ham, 2nd for defense, but 5th for attack. Attack's on the left, by the way. And these are done by Fantasy Football Hub. They're extremely useful. There's so many other benefits you can get, none more so than copying the teams of some of the best in the world, like Rich Clark and Ben Crellin, all for about £3.50 a month. This is the last week of 50% off. I encourage you to capitalize on what is a brilliant offer. The value for money is magnificent. You can get that with a link in the description. So much more on offer, right? My Team AI tool as well. So I would definitely encourage you to go and check it out. Take action because it is the last week you can do so. Going back to the analysis, however, on the left, you have the fixture ticker for the attack, and on the right, the defense. And I think with the current landscape, it's really important to nail those like budget options. So I thought I'd use this as a way to talk through a few of them. We're actually going to start with the defense. I like Ethan Pinnock. I think, as you can see, the best set of fixtures from now till 11. I've chosen up to 11 because there's a fixture swing 12, so you probably want to change strategy and change players. Pinnock's a good threat in the opposition's box as well. So I'd call him a mini Gabriel. I'm not sure that's a little bit offensive to Gabriel, but maybe a mini Gabriel, right? You've got Tottenham there in third. I like that because Pedro Porro. I've obviously spoken a lot about how I expect clean sheets to be on the decline and therefore attacking returns for defenders to be even more important. So I really like the look of Pinnock and Porro, who I think both are going slightly under the radar now. Three other teams I wanted to speak, 4 other teams I speak about as well. I'm not too high on West Ham at the moment because of how they're playing. If they change, maybe, but otherwise I'm just leaving them. The 4 teams I wanted to speak about are the ones ranked 4 to 7th: Everton, Man United, Man City, and Nottingham Forest. City, really nice run from 7. We've obviously spoken about Gvardiol and Lewis. They could potentially be inroads to a very, very strong defense. Man United assets, given that Dalot is priced at 5, given that Mazraoui is priced at 4.6, maybe you're considering an Onana. All of them have decent ceilings in their different ways, and as a result, I would at least consider maybe buying one in game week 8. Right, look at Brentford, then West Ham away, and then Leicester at home in 11. So I consider that. Forest, I've obviously waxed lyrical about, and I think with their structure, they're going to generate clean sheets. The likes of Marilla, I think Marilla will eventually score a header from a corner because he's been so close so many times. Ola Aina is a good price as well at 4.5. So those are 2 I definitely consider. Everton, I only have them there because I think with the returning injured players, Idrissa Gana Gueye, Branthwaite at 4.3, Mikalenko himself at 4.3, potentially Mikalenko could be a decent option, and thus I would definitely consider that. Finally, going on to the attack, you can see Tottenham ranked in 8th. I mean, if Solanke ever gets going, and I would wait for him to get going, not just 1 goal against Brentford, but let him get at least 1 more and put in a really good performance. Really nice, really nice option there. And number 9 will usually be quite safe. Ipswich, I would generally fade because I think, again, you want to go for players with slightly higher ceilings, even when they're cheap, such as Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I mean, that fixture run is magnificent. It is really, really strong. And I think Calvert-Lewin and McNeil should both be considered there. West Ham, for me, mainly Bowen, but Kudus at 6.3 if you're willing to accept some form of the risk, given how West Ham are playing. And he's probably not on the end of as much as you would like, probably playing too much of a creative role. But if you are willing to accept the risk, Bowen and Kudus. Arsenal, we've spoken about a lot today. Forest, Chris Woods. I mean, I spoke about him in previous videos. Brilliant asset, given his expected minutes are a lot better than I expected pre-season. And he's got penalties now, and he's only 6'1". I like it a lot. United, I mean, look, it's actually quite interesting. Bruno, I would avoid. I just think you're paying too much at 8.5 for a guy who's playing this type of role. If he was playing an out-and-out number 10 role, high volume of shots, high volume of attacking actions in the final third, and they're quite output-orientated actions, fine. But with what he's doing, I just don't think it's worth it at 8.5. If just one winger could nail down a spot, 90 minutes each week, if they could get Amad Diallo out of the picture by just putting in serious performances week in, week out, to the point that Ten Hag has no choice but to just keep him on the pitch and start him every game, I think one of Garnacho or Rashford could be really, really good. It's actually a differential I'm considering, especially Garnacho. If United and mainly Ten Hag just allows one of them to start 90 game in, game out, they've got a lot of transitional threat in that side. So the games like Tottenham and Villa, and obviously to an extent, but not as much, they're fine on. And then they've still got enough quality, as you saw against Palace, to create a lot. So I actually do think Man United assets are slightly underrated, mainly Garnacho and Rashford, on the assumption the expected minutes are good. And then Brentford, we've spoken about in Bowen. If Shada becomes an option, great. I don't think he will, though. That seemed like quite a long one. I don't know exactly how long, but I definitely imagine half an hour plus. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got value out of it. I'll be back tomorrow for my team selection where we can discuss what I am going to do with Eze. Am I going to sell him? What am I going to do with defense, etc., etc. Again, if you've made it to this point in the video, please do like the video, turn on notifications, and of course, subscribe. I shall see you tomorrow. And in the meantime, make sure to make it a great day. Goodbye.